Welcome to episode 6 of the Sacred Nectar podcast. Thank you for listening. Today I have a friend named Jason Elliott. They make music and their gifts to the world are endless and beautiful, and I'm so happy to share their work with you today and let them talk about their work. I hope you enjoy this episode. It's fun and it's light. Near the end, we discuss my journey of motherhood and how it feels to be a mother in this current state of 2023 that we are in. You will also get to hear a piece of their work that I am a part of at the very end. So I hope you do listen to the end, and thank you. Enjoy, friends. Just a little intro into how we know each other. We worked together for about 4 years. During that time, it was really fun to work with you, but also it was a pleasure to explore you as a person. I think your energy is very needed in the earth right now, and we all have our bad days and we can look at ourselves in the mirror and think the exact opposite. But I think that's part of the journey right now on earth, is to understand and welcome every aspect of everybody, even though that's really hard. So anyway, super side trail, but that is how we met and why I thought that I would want to do this with you. And so here you are. Thank you so much for the acceptance of my invitation to be here and to share your work. Feel free to give a little intro of your personhood, what your personal, I always say nectar, but the thing that brings you the most joy, to just share about that. So yeah, open to you.
Well, I want to say thank you for having me. I like listening to you. I've known you for a few years now, and you're someone very special to me. And I miss you in my daily life. You're such a wonderful presence to have around. And you may not know this, but you honestly inspire me in my daily life, because you were one of the first examples to me of the job that I currently do for money. You were one of the first examples of how that job should be played out, whatever the words are I'm looking for there. But I still hold you as the ideal as to how that should be taken care of. So not only do I think you're a wonderful person, and I'm glad that we became friends. Hi, I feel really happy to be here and hanging out with you today.
Yay.
I'm a weirdo for people who don't know me. Maybe that's why you find me interesting in some way. I am someone who struggles with the world and is looking to find a happier place in it. As far as the nectar goes, there are two things right now that bring me the most joy in life. One is when I find the time. I do enjoy making electronic music. I tend to do that alone, but there's a big history and all that. But anyway, that is something I do when I can carve out the time, and I should carve out more. That's something that I do for myself that makes me feel really good. It's one of the things about life that I appreciate most. So there's a very spiritual aspect to that. The thing that fills me with joy and love and energy and strength when I listen to the work of others is also something that I dabble in. So there are times when that makes me feel similar ways to the way they make me feel. That's one thing. And I recently had a very rough summer last year in 2022. And I sort of began a personal transformation a little bit. And that's something else that has been bringing me a lot of joy lately. At times in life, I have not been the happiest person. I am trying to reevaluate myself and the way I view the world so that I can function in a happier space in the world where I may not agree with the way things are in the world. I may not agree with the systems that have been established by humanity in order to control the world. However, I find myself in that world, and rather than rail against it, find some way to accept who I am and what my beliefs are while still operating in that as the real world. It's something that has been something that I've been struggling with my entire life, and just in the last 9 months or so, I've decided to address it within myself. So as far as nectar goes, those are my two things right now that are bringing me a lot of joy and helping me to navigate life and feel good about life and better about life and better about myself in life. So that was what I set out to answer in your question. Where is the nectar?
That's very beautiful. And when I hear you talk about your electronic music making and finding the time and even just enjoying it from others, the thing that I hear the most is your connection with yourself. You are, when you listen to others, you're connecting with these parts of you that their work touches inside of you. So you can feel this other part of yourself and explore more of this feeling and this energy. But it's interesting that as you were talking about this other thing that's both bringing you joy and also a huge struggle of finding kind of your thought path and just personal role right now in the world, which is, I think, is a lifelong journey. So I think you're right where you're supposed to be. But I think that you're also saying about translating it all internally, bringing it all inside and making clear of all the energies that are coming and swirling and so forth. And so these things tie hand in hand and so beautiful. So thank you for sharing your different things that are inspiring you in their own way, even though maybe they're not necessarily pleasant to experience at all times. But yeah, I'm really, really happy to hear that you're finding joy even in kind of a hard thing, as well as a really beautiful thing. Music making is so lovely, and that's where I want to go with this. Your music making journey. Tell me more about how you even got into music. Tell me about that beginning for you.
I'm going to do that, but first I need to back step one. We're going to go off on a little rabbit trail.
Go ahead.
Um, the two things that I just said that give me joy are absolutely related to each other, and I suppose I'm kind of peripherally aware of it. But until you said what you just said, I didn't actually see them as like literally like right next to each other, going, "Hey, how are you?" Um, when I make music, I'm actually kind of creating a world for myself. I don't necessarily pop songs or anything of that nature. I'm not opposed to vocals. In fact, I come from a place where I used to sing in a band, so there were vocals, and I love songs that have vocals, but a lot of what I do tends to be a little instrumental. And I think I'm just kind of creating a world that I would want to live in, as a reaction to some aspects of the world that I do live in. So it's really interesting that you sitting here with you allows me to like instantly make that connection. Like, yeah, thanks.
Yes, they are.
Thanks for
Yeah,
I totally
I definitely do see them tied as hand in hand. It is exactly what you said. You are creating, our creations are, in from my perspective, I feel like this is very true, an envisioning of the future. However, that plays out for every individual is different, but I feel like our creations are envisions of a different future, which is also an envisionment of the now. So,
yeah,
so you are
absolutely.
bringing your heaven to you as you create, and that's beautiful. And as you figure out all the swirls of the world as well, you are bringing your heaven to you. So that's lovely. Yeah, so share more about how you got started into this creative energy, this music making.
I'm going to try to keep it concise. I am 52 years old at this moment, and that's, you talk about a lifelong journey. It's a lifelong journey. Um, but there are key moments in life, and it's funny. One of them will tie into spiritual aspects as well. For me, I think my whole music making journey, and many other aspects of my life, started with the film Star Wars in 1977, which is a gift that my father gave to me. I have always been of the mind. I was definitely a nerdy kid, but I wasn't really into anything as a child. I saw some Disney movies, and I didn't really like sports. I wasn't really into the things that lots of young boys are immediately into. Um, and so I think my dad kind of was like struggling with like, what can I do to like make my son happier? What's gonna like make him go, oh, cool, I like that. And Star Wars came out when I was 6 years old, the very first movie. Um, Movies didn't look like that. And, I know you asked me like what my musical journey is, but this is where it
It all
starts.
ties,
Movies,
yes.
movies didn't look like that. It literally changed the face of entertainment, for better and worse. Go be honest there. But the sound in that movie, John Williams' soundtrack in a giant, movie theater with those dazzlingly large visuals,
Yeah.
along with all of the science fiction sounds, the spaceships and the lasers and the computers. I When I look back at life, that was a profound moment for me. And my dad saw it and said, "I think I just saw what my kid likes," which was just space, Star Wars, whatever it is. My kid lit up over this thing, and he liked it too. So that's something that we share. And I remember him buying the album. It was a double vinyl gatefold with pictures and everything, like shortly after the film came out, and putting it on in our living room at incredibly loud volume. And for me, as a little 6-year-old boy, I sat there and I felt like I was in the movie. I could hear the music was triumphant, and then it was scary, and then it was tense, and I just sat there dazzled because I remembered seeing the movie, and I was kind of replaying it in my head as I heard all the music. And so I think that's where it started. At that moment, my parents went off to do, because I was obviously captivated by the music. My parents went off to do what parents sometimes might do when their child is otherwise occupied. Um, I thought about that years later. Like, that's where they went for an hour. Shortly thereafter, I heard a lot of music on the radio, pop music, early 70s stuff, early 80s or late 70s, early 80s stuff, soul music. And I got into things that I heard on the radio. My dad really liked that because he would like to be listening to music. Disco happened. My parents followed all of the cool music trends. Whatever John Travolta was into at the time in whatever the popular movie was, that's what my parents listened to. So there was disco for a year or two, then it went to country music for a year or two. But I liked the disco. There was something about that moving forward beat, just always constantly moving forward. The dance beat. As a kid, I didn't really dance. I didn't know what it was. I just liked the sound of it. It was sort of mechanical to me. It just was like a machine always moving forward. In high school, I was introduced to some new wave music, Depeche Mode, New Order, Pet Shop Boys, things that were made entirely with keyboards and weird sci-fi sounds, along with that big orchestral, dramatic thing that Star Wars had, instilled in me. All of these things kind of fused together. And right about the time I was 18, 19, 20, electronic music sort of took a little turn and became techno and house, and it became very beat oriented and very sci-fi, blips and bleeps and interesting sounds. There was a lot of hallucinogenic aspect to it, which is something I also experimented with as a very young man. And so all of that sort of coalesced into why I first fell in love with music. Music has always profoundly impacted me, including instrumental music. As a very young boy after Star Wars, I listened to nothing but soundtrack music before I discovered pop music on the radio. Raiders of the Lost Ark soundtrack, anything that was cool, that was a movie that I liked, that had cool music, often by John Williams, because it made me feel like I was in the movie. It added this added this soundtrack to my life. So all of those things ultimately culminate in why I love music and why I ended up making music. As to how I started making music, which is a different story and one in which I'm very blessed in so many ways, especially considering the type of music and the time frame that this happened in. I had a really close-knit group of friends in high school. Some of us had known each other from junior high, lived in Southern California, a little bit north of Los Angeles, in a small town called Valencia, which is now a big city called Santa Clarita. One of my friends, a guy named Ray Maple, exposed me to bands like Depeche Mode and New Order, people who were making music a little counterculturally. It was still rooted in the pop music formula, but it was made with all keyboards and drum machines and things that traditionally weren't, you didn't hear a lot of on the radio unless they were masked to try to sound like a real instrument. And I just loved the way it all sounded. So ultimately, I probably owe this particular, the last 40 years of my journey to my friend Ray Maple for turning me on to, I guess, what was called at the time new wave music. And so many of my friends were creative. We made a lot of movies together. We all wanted to be George Lucas and Steven Spielberg and tell cool stories and do special effects. My friend Ray and my other friend John, they were makeup guys. We would do horror movies and stuff, and they would do like scary, bloody, gory makeup, and they were really good at it. John, who did a lot of makeup and eventually ended up with a career in special effects, which is really cool for him. He was the type of kid growing up who was a mad scientist. He tinkered with everything electric. And I remember at one point, his parents had this huge upstairs part of their house. I guess it could have been an attic at some point, but it had been converted into just one big giant room. And he had taken speakers, random speakers, and put them all around this giant room. And he had converted them all into microphones, which is really easy to do, actually. You can literally just plug it in a microphone spot. The speaker becomes a microphone. And he was recording these like 12 speaker stereo things. Like he was striking matches, like in 12, and you would hear it in your headphones, like in these circular, I was like, this guy's crazy. But anyway, he had one of my oldest friends, but he had a Roland keyboard, a JX8P. And so we could go over there and play and make cool sounds and stuff. And at some point in our early 20s, out of high school, most of us were just working or going to community college. It was 1990-ish, right around there. My friend Ray said, we were listening to a lot of electronic music and going out to clubs and raves. That was happening. Techno, and it was all like brand new. It was like this wild, crazy new world. And the more we listened to it, the more we could break it down in our heads and go like, we could make that, if only we had the devices that made those sounds, we could make that. Well, John has a keyboard and it makes some pretty cool sounds, So what else? We'd probably need something to make drums and, a sampler or something to get cool sounds and, voices and things like that. And then we could probably do that. So a group of us just pooled money together. We did not have a lot. We were all fairly poor, except for one friend whose family was kind of upper middle class, you might call, and he would kind of throw some money every now and then, convince his parents to help us buy a piece of equipment. But we were all so lucky. We started off with just a couple things that just a few of us bought with our own money and tried to figure them out. There was no YouTube, there was no internet. So we were literally just listening to this new kind of music and trying to figure out on our own in a vacuum in a small town with no instruction, because there was no instruction, how to make that kind of music. We did that, and that went on for several years. We had a lot of fun. It became like, it's one of my favorite memories in life. And it's hard not to live in the past when like you have this magical thing in your past. That's something I've struggled with throughout life. Wishing that life was more like that, the older I get, when it's not like that. Living in a house with a whole bunch of friends and just making music 24 hours a day, it was magical. And that's why I do what I do. We just sort of stumbled upon it, and we created this family that oftentimes, forgive me if any of my real family is listening to this, that often felt as real, if not more real, than my actual family. For many, many years of my life. Probably spent a good decade of my life with these people. And now it's the part where I get a little sad, because I hardly ever see any of them anymore. life goes on. We're all in our 50s. Everyone's got different lives now, but it was an amazing part of life. So did that answer your question?
Yeah.
At some point, I stopped making music. Things fell apart a couple times. People's lives changed. The band lost a couple members 3 or 4 years after we started. We hadn't really reached any success, and it was a lot harder to achieve success back then. Your only route was to get a record deal, but it's not like things. It's not like the way things are now, where you can literally just self-publish from your home, which is awesome. I wouldn't change a thing though. I'm glad that I got to do it. At the time we did it, it was so punk, even though it was, techno disco, and it was still like, it was so punk to be able to do that. So I gave it up a couple times. The band changed roster once or twice. We gave it another shot, and ultimately we were just doing it because we liked to do it. We had dreams of financial success, but we were all sort of dumb artists who just thought that if you did it, eventually someone would find it. That all ties into my whole anti-capitalist thing, which we haven't touched on, and maybe won't get there, probably for the best. Just wasn't a thing. It was like, look, this is what we do. Oh wait, we have to have money to survive in the world. Like, that doesn't. We weren't thinking about that. We weren't even doing this to do that particular. At least I wasn't. So there's a weird thing there. But there was a period where I gave up on it, just stopped, and like I realized life was so empty. It took several years. Focused on other things. Focused on trying to make money and like be an adult and things like that. That's happened a couple times in my life where I just stopped making music for years, and then I always seem to come back to it, and it always seems to make me feel so much better. And then it also hurts me a lot too. There's lots of ways that music can hurt, that anything creative, I think, can make you feel good about yourself, but also really doubt yourself. The whole imposter syndrome thing. Anyway, that's like the bulk of, I guess, my musical journey. I guess I should end it with it's often a struggle for me these days, and for the last decade of my life or so. When I do make music, there's no one doing it with me. It's a very different feeling than the way I'm familiar with making music. So that can be very lonely sometimes, and other times it's really freeing. But there's definitely a struggle there with like accomplishing something. It's all well and good to sit here and like be jamming and like, wow, this is the coolest 30 seconds of music like I've ever made. But if you don't turn it into a song, there's nothing wrong with having fun and doing that. And you were expressing creativity. That's awesome. I have so many things like that stored in my computer that, I had so much fun those 4 hours making that 30 seconds, and it just sits there. I didn't do anything with it, even though it may be really cool. And sometimes I go back and listen. I go, when did I make that? Because that's amazing. That really needs to be spread out and like turned into a song. That's my big struggle these days, is believing in myself enough in a kind of solitary place, because there is no one else making music with me going, hey, I thought we should be done with this, next week, and so we can do the next song. No one's waiting for me to finish anything. I don't really have an audience. I don't have any other band members or anyone expecting anything at any time. So sometimes last year I finished, I think, 1 song. And I think the year before that, I might have finished 2. And there were probably at least 4 to 7 that were close enough that if I gave them a week or 2 of love, instead of goofing off, making another 30-second, oh yeah, this sounds so cool, I would have had, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 songs to show for a year. That's really like the thing I'm trying to overcome now, says the guy who a while back said, whenever I can carve out the time, I like to make music because it's fun.
I love the things that you touched on in your journey that fueled it, which was just this experience of the human power to create, which is what you and your friends did. You guys got together. You didn't have, like you said, training. You didn't have even really a lot of tools. You just explored what you did have available to you, and you rolled with it. And you did stuff, and it was beautiful. And it was this extremely pleasant and fabulous space for your memory, but also I'm sure it was to experience that. And that's what is also hidden throughout your music, is this recreation of this beautiful space that you are duplicating and recreating and exploring and expanding to share with others, because you also want to share that with others, because you know how mesmerizing and beautiful and precious that was to you. One of the things that you touched on was that as you know, as you've grown now and your lives have changed, you don't have a community of musicians surrounding you, and you're not making music with other people. And so in a way, you're bringing those elements back into your space during those moments. And even though they're not there with you, they're still playing, those energies are still playing forth in your creativeness. And I think that's really beautiful. And your music is really powerful in creating those environments, I feel, as well. But that touched on something that is so dear to my heart, which is a sense of community and this need for community that is really, really evident in our world right now. There's a saying, and I don't know who said it: anything in isolation will always function in chaos. Because we are, as nature shows, we are very in need of, and not in a needy way, and not in a codependent way, but just our own diversity is what brings balance to others. And when we don't have this community aspect of people around us to support us, to encourage us, to give us feedback, there's this bit of energetic isolation that is very hard to grapple with. And so many times we are, we seek the doctor because we think we have something wrong with us, or a psychiatrist, or whatever else. And it's really not that, it's our society. And why the hell would you ever want to be adapted to a maladjusted society? But most people don't look at it like that. They just look at it like, well, I must be the problem because everybody else is functioning well. Well, no, we're not functioning well. We are holding on for a new tomorrow. And your music is definitely riddled with this energy of a new, a new, a new, a new. And I really like that. Every time I listen to it, I'm super inspired, just like even in that moment, to just be so, just the immersion of it into the music is just so nourishing. So that's one aspect that, like, firsthand, it's evident in your work. And I really like that about your work. So yeah, wow, what a beautiful beginning for you. I love too how you just were so mesmerized by the different sounds and so forth as a child, and I can totally relate to that. In fact, I think on my Spotify now have a playlist for the soundtrack. I've never seen the movie, never once, but just the masterpiece that was created by those musicians. The fluid in and out and the crescendos and all this other energy that brings music to life is just so powerful in translating energy into our bodies. And I can really relate to that musical energy feel. And actually, one of the things that also came up for me that reminded me of how we have remained friends since we stopped working together is your exact frustration of you're not creating music in community. And I remember we had a talk shortly after I quit working with you about this need to create and this need to share our creations with each other. And you're like, send them over anytime. And I'm like, okay, whenever I get to it, I'll send you something over. And it was probably a full year later
That
that
was a while.
that I sent you something that I was like, Jason, I did it. I don't know what it is. I had this energy. I put it out there, and here's the recording. And I kind of forgot about it after I did it and sent it to you. And I just kind of forgot about it. And then it was a little while later, and you said, hey, I'm making a song with your voice and the stuff you sent me. And I was like, oh, I totally forgot that I did that. But I think that's so, that's just the beauty of creating is you don't know the end process. You don't know where it's going. And just immersing yourself into this this energy of, I'm going to roll with it. I'm just going to let this feeling flow through me. I'm going to see where it goes. I'm going to explore it and expand it. This is super precious. And I think you mentioned you did psychedelics when you were younger. And I think this ties into this. People I've noticed who have done psychedelics moderately, if you've overdone it, there's generally
Yeah.
not a situation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
If you've done it moderately, then you have this understanding of a whole new dimension of reality, and you are able to perceive and feel and let things flow through you very differently because your perceptions have opened. So I think that's also a really, really important piece too. I believe in the mushrooms are medicine. Part of why our world is so capitalistic driven, in my opinion, is because we are not expanded from nature's perspective. We are expanded from a human perspective, which is oh so small and limited. And nature is expansive and beautiful and wide and creative. There's always this lovely energetic flow happening. We often can't enter into that energetic flow and creative space because we're in our human energy. We're so tied to this. Our energy is infinite. And when we relax into that reality and are less focused on the material aspects of our world, life happens really beautifully. And that's what is super evident in your work, too. So, yeah, thank you for your work.
Thank you. I have two things I wanted to say to you based on what you just said. And the first is I find it so interesting that you used the phrase, I think you said that my music sounds very new. And I suppose it is. I mean, although electronic music's been around for a while now, and in my head, like it's still this like cool new thing, and it's so not now. To me, it's all, everything that I do is really rooted in nostalgia. That's why I make it. I'm looking to recreate the music that I loved then now. And I listen to so much modern music and also a lot of older music that it's this sort of fusion where I want to bring some modern sensibilities to it, and I want to bring some of my own personal story to it as well. But ultimately, I'm doing my best to make something that I like, that is just steeped in how I felt those days, in that world that I lived with, the people that I lived with. I always try to have a band name. I guess it's just sort of a, I don't like using my name to make music. It's just not cool enough, like Jason Elliott, like whatever. That's my name. I've been that my whole life. So I always have like a band name, even though it's just me. And my music currently is so nostalgic to me, and it's about that time. It's about those people. That my band name currently is When It Was Us. I was making songs and they all had nostalgic vibes to me, and every song title sort of was like a nod to the past, and that was just a song title I came up with, and it just kept coming back to me. And I think that's what I'm going to be when I finally believe in myself enough to actually put music out on Apple and Spotify and all that, which I'm hoping to do this year. I really am. My first little collection. When I do, I think I'm going to release it under that name, but it's so rooted in the past with my friends. And that name to me is kind of cool. It's sort of open ended. You could put yourself into it. It could be romantic, or it could be familial. It could be friendship. It could be social commentary. I like it. I just wanted to say it's interesting that you say it's like new and futuristic and stuff, and I suppose it kind of is. I'm totally always going for that, although I know I'm old and rooted in the past, so it's also nostalgic to me. And the other thing I wanted to say was in relation to humanity and the lack of interaction with nature. I think we as humans these days, for the most part, as a society anyway, are so divided. We just, division is our bread and butter. Not only are we divided sexually, politically, racially, religiously, but we also, the society we've carved out for ourselves in cities and such is also very divided from nature. So I don't want to go into a bad territory, but you made me think about it when you were talking about that, and I saw you skillfully steer yourself back to positive, which is something I'm attempting to do in life these days as well. But I just wanted to touch on that because I find it interesting. It's something that I think that we as a people need to overcome, and it does sort of tie into an experience I've had for the last several months, where I'll bring it back to music. It's going back to a Michael Jackson song called "Man in the Mirror." I didn't even think about it till just now, but like, I'm starting with me, rather than feeling that things aren't the way they ought to be and being unhappy with that, and and feeling powerless against it. It's the same reason I make music. I have decided to just live in the world the way I want the world to exist. I suppose it's, be who you want to be, live how you want to live. There was a TV quote. I'm very story oriented. A lot of my life lessons come from fiction, and I have learned a lot lately that that's not always a bad thing, and that it actually happens for a lot of people. But there was this TV show, and they'll come from the weirdest places, I'll just do an aside and say, my personal religious beliefs have more akin to Star Wars than anything else. I know that makes me sound like a weirdo, and it's absolutely true. But there was a television show, it was a Buffy the Vampire Slayer spinoff called Angel, and he was like a dark, brooding vampire guy. But there was a quote in that show that I will never forget, and there are all these, I guess they're your own little personal credos, your own personal integrity. I always aspired to be good enough for this quote, and the quote was, it's a side character who's a lawyer speaking to a person who is a hero, basically, and says to them, "You are a champion. You live your life as if the world were the way it is supposed to be instead of the way it actually is." And that line, if I just phrased it correctly so that it made sense, that line stuck with me so much. This woman tells him, "You're someone who lives your life as if the world were the way it ought to be instead of the way it actually is right now." And that's sort of the way I try to live life these days, and I fail a lot, but it ties into music too, because in music I'm creating a better world that I get to live in. And I guess personally I'm also on a very small scale, but there's an aspect to the job that you used to have and that I still have that allows me to like share that out and kind of spread that among people. So that's something I'm really enjoying and trying to pursue in life right now, is to find a way to be the way I want the world to be, and to share that with others as often as I can. And for someone who's sort of a self-proclaimed hermit, that can be hard to accomplish. It's really special to me in that way. Like, I get to interact with random people all day long and spread my energy with them. And when you knew me there, I sort of hid from that. I wasn't comfortable with it. It made me feel like I was self-conscious, I guess is the phrase. That's an aspect of my life that ties in so much to, I suppose, my struggle of, raging against the way of the world, that I get to go to this place that still does capitalism, and I'm being paid to go there and do capitalism. But I know I have to live in the world. I have to pay rent. I have to buy food. I have to pay bills, But I love that aspect of that job that we shared. And it's one of the reasons that you're so special to me. And it's one of the reasons that I am grateful every day that I wake up. A lot of people hate going to work, and some days I don't want to go to work, and I don't want to stand and have hard, heavy things and be forced to socially interact. I'm so blessed that I have that output in my life these days, because it's part of, I don't know that you, even when you set out to do this interview with me, knew that I was going through this in life right now. And you're a big part of it in that way. Like, you're someone who was in that world that I was introduced to. Anyway, I didn't want to go off on a tangent about our job, but it's something really profound that has happened to me because of it. And I wanted to say that to you, and that I often think of you when I'm there, just because you are a high standard of, that's how I should be in ways. Not, I'm never going to be Patricia, but, or just like how when I make music, my friends Ray and John are sitting right next to me sometimes. Not always, but sometimes they're sitting right there next to me. And sometimes when I'm at that job doing that work, Patricia is standing right next to me and I'm smiling. And so you're magic. But how did I go off in that direction?
You were talking about nostalgia and how it creates your music, and then you merged and you brought yourself right back to that. And I I like that you said that, because the energy that I perceive as new isn't necessarily a new as in future, but new as in um, it's renewable within. Like it continually grows and morphs, and it blossoms within you as you're listening to it, right? And um, as we know in the quantum world, time is not linear, despite what it looks like. So while you're having nostalgia, you are also creating that way, the other way as well. So past and future is all met in this now moment. And so that's just another beautiful aspect of the creative power, is to morph and create, our past and our future the way we want it.
So for me, mostly making music isn't really about struggle. It really is about creating a world that I want to live in. When I was younger, I really wanted music to be a career. I was really hopeful that it would be, although I was stupid and I didn't pursue the smart, the business aspect of it, because again, for whatever reason, and I'm still trying to figure that out. Money didn't ever matter to me. It just never really mattered to me, never. And it's made my life really hard, but it's also made my life really beautiful. So as a young person, I kind of just assumed that, hey, I'm making music now and it's good and people seem to like it. We have like an audience, we have fans, we play live. We were playing live like at the Whiskey in Hollywood, with like every other band was a rock band. We were doing like electronic pop in like 1989 or 1990, 91. All this equipment on stage. People didn't even know what the hell was going on. Like, what is this? It just wasn't really a thing in the United States all that much.
Mm-hmm.
But I just assumed something was going to happen. Like we were doing it, so since this is what we're doing and this is who I am, something's going to happen. And when it didn't, it was sort of sad, and it's our fault.
But I think that's exactly what makes it part of your medicine,
Yeah,
is that
that's
it is
why I do it.
not
I do it
tied
for
to
me.
that, right? And that is, I mean, I think that's why it's so precious, and why it comes out the way it does, is because it's not on a performance based creation space. It's on a truly intuitive creation space in which you're doing it. And I think that makes all the difference. So,
Thank you.
yeah,
That's why I do it. I do it because I like doing it.
yeah,
And I always hope that others will like it as well. And if they don't, I'm okay with that. And if they do, I try
yes,
to say, oh yeah, I'm okay with that too, but like as someone who kind of works in isolation and doesn't have like a lot of fans or even that many friends that are all that interested these days, like anytime someone does go, hey, I listened to your thing, I liked it. It's like, oh wow, thank you, that's so cool. Oh wow, I'm like, oh well, blushing, like it's
yeah,
silly. Um, but of course, you want people to like what you do. You want someone to go, oh, that I can tell you made that. Like that reminds me of you or something. Like
yeah.
that kind of thing matters. And that's where making music starts to get a little lonely sometimes, because sometimes you can sit and actually make something and finish it and be really proud of it and like put it online and go, wow, like people are going to really like this, and like even the people like end up not listening to it. And people have lives, their lives are busy. I'm too busy to make music sometimes. How can I expect other people are going to give me 3 to 6 minutes of their life?
I think this is perfect segue into the song that you created, with my voice. How did it come to you to create with my voice?
First, someone that I really, really like moved away, and I didn't get to see them every day the way I used to, and that's you.
Yeah.
Uh, and you right before you left, you had talked. I have always I've always like kind of been hopeful to meet other people, someone that might be interested in like partnering up or even just doing a song or two. Or I, you know, I would really love to find partners again. I miss that dynamic. That's why I make music, was because of all that, you know, and that's when it was us, you know.
Yes.
Wow. When you left, you mentioned something to that effect, and then you sent me a few months later or a year later, I, you know, going back to our other conversation, you sent me something. There were three files. One of them was you singing, and the other one was you talking. Um, as listeners of your podcast know, your voice is very soothing and comforting. It made me feel like you were hanging around with me a little bit, like, you know, hey, that's that person I miss. I sat on the files that you sent me for another like 3 to 6 months, I think, before I did anything with them. It was a little phase where I was dabbling in music here and there, but we really didn't have a plan, wasn't just kind of goofing off. But there was a contest on tracklib.com. One of my favorite artists who created one of my all-time favorite albums was having a not a remix competition. He was having an original song competition where you could take goal was to create a new original work using samples of his original songs. Not a remix competition. Do not remix his songs. Create a new original song using one or more elements from one or more of these four songs. I had about a month and a half in which to play around with a song idea and basically create a finished song, which is that's pretty fast for me these days. I don't That's not the pace at which I work. So anyway, this competition happened. I make music that is steeped in nostalgia. This is one of my favorite artists who released an album. His name is Nick Bracegirdle, but the artist's name is Chicane, and the album is called Far from the Maddening Crowds. And this album has a particular nostalgic sound that is unique at the time and means so much to me. It paints a picture of a place that exists in the world, and it's a place that I've never been to in my life, but I've spent so much time listening to this album, which is a representation of a place that means something to the creator, that I have my own version of this place in my head that this album captures. And if I ever went to the place that the album is about, it would be resoundingly disappointing to me because it would not match this vision of the place that's in my head.
Right.
So anyway, it's basically a seaside beach holiday, English coastal. I believe Ibiza might be involved, but that is the vibe of the record. It's very ambient. There are some dance elements and there are some break beats, which I always find very appealing. The contest was create a new original work using elements from four songs from that album. My brain immediately loved that idea, and I wanted to make a song for Nick himself. I wanted to make a song for him and for me. I wanted to communicate with the artist himself and say, your music has inspired me so much that I am creating this song in the hopes that you might hear how much of you is in me here. I'm trying to make a child of your album, some sort of relative of that album that's a member of my family, and I just want you to hear that, you know. And I know that's not what they were looking for, and he may have listened to it. He may have heard my message to him in there. I wanted to recreate what he had given me for so many years of my life. I didn't win the contest, and that's totally okay. I went into the contest knowing that I wouldn't win the contest. And while I was making it, I've been going through a musical renaissance of my own where I've been realizing that I listen to so much different music, and I don't need my music to sound as complex and complicated and melodic as some of the music that touches me so deeply that, like, I just don't create that kind of music necessarily. But I do create other types of music. But I discovered in that process that I was basically making a little movie. And I was trying to capture the feeling that he had given me throughout the years with his album of this place that I've never been to, but is a part of me, my own representation of this place. There was a story involved. There's a lot of imagery in my head. And I just instinctively went to the recordings of your voice because in electronic music, there is often a missing element, and that is humanity. There is often missing human element. And the recordings that you gave me are just gold. not only from a word and phrase and intent perspective, but even just the sound of your voice to me musically. Like you can cut out syllables and consonants and make music out of audio. So in this instance, and I've been doing that in something new recently, but in this one in particular, it almost seemed like you show up kind of like a narrator. You say three things in the song, and I hear them as plain as day because I sat there painstakingly listening to them over and over again. But I realized the listener, I think you even said you weren't sure what you were saying. The first thing that you say is, I was listening to a song, which kicks off the song, wow, how deep. But you were speaking to me in the recording, and I heard that, and it fit perfect. It was right there, and I'm like, you know what? And that's from that moment on, in the little sonic movie that I created, there is a woman walking around wearing headphones on a beach, like in the morning before the sun comes up, or right as the sun comes up, but it's overcast, it's gray. The song's called Windswept. It's all about that imagery to me. Quiet moment, alone, but not sad. I was trying to evoke a feeling in a place, but your voice felt like a narrator in that regard. So you introduce the song and say, I was listening to a song, and then the little breakbeat kicks, because that's what I do. And later on, you say something that is really profound to me, especially to hear it from your voice. You say, you're not separate. And I snipped it out of you saying something else. You do say those three words together. Actually, you say, we're not separate, is what you say. But the way I've edited it sounds as if you are saying, you're not separate. And that is a really important message for me as a person who is sort of a self-described hermit. And so to hear you say that at that moment in the song, that was a little message for me. And then at the very end, because I had already in my head had new imagery invoked because of what I had used from your voice, of the character of a person strolling alone on a solitary early morning, coastal, as if she's been composing a message or thinking about a message or thinking about a person, a friend or someone. And she says, that's you and me. That's the last thing that you say. So the three things that you say throughout the song are, I was listening to a song, you're not separate, that's you and me. So it told a little bit of a story to me. There's a little trilogy there. Like there's a little setup and there's some conflict, and then there's like a resolution. That's, I guess, the story of like my song.
Well, I'm glad that I was part of it and that
I am
it
too.
worked.
I'm really glad of that. It's one of my favorite parts of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So tell me where people can find you.
Right now I'm on SoundCloud. My name is Jason Elliott. It's spelled Jason, but my last name is Elliott.
So as we are at the end, I wanted to offer you the chance to ask me any questions. So did you have any questions for me?
I know that time is of the essence for you today, but I really did have a question that I wanted to ask you because you're a friend of mine and we don't get to talk a lot. And it's probably also relevant to your podcast, and I think your listeners might be interested in knowing is, first of all, I'm male. I also identify as male. I will never be able to have a baby, and it kind of freaked me out when I was a kid. And I think I actually talked to you about that a little bit when you were pregnant the first time because we worked together, and like how it freaked me out a little bit that you're growing a human inside of you, and you're growing your second one right now too, which that's just so mystifying to me. But I kind of specifically, I'm trying to be cute about it because my question might be a little weird. I kind of just want to know what it's like to be a mother, but that's an open-ended question, something I will never experience. But specifically, I want to know what it's like to be a mother and to be raising a young human being specifically at this time in the world when, things are a struggle for everybody in so many different ways. And I don't know that I could do what you're doing right now, and I'm just curious about what it's like to be doing it.
Yeah, well, it is heavy, but it's also not. So my view as a parent has actually really changed just by being a mother. When I was pregnant with my first, I was very excited, and I felt like hindsight, and I look back, I think I really absolutely knew nothing. That's okay, you have to start your journey somewhere. But becoming a mother expanded me in every possible manner, every dimension. I grew internally, externally, all of it. And I don't mean like my physical body got bigger. I mean, you watched me morph and change. But I also, returned, and now I'm again expanding again physically. But I mean, really, truly, mentally, emotionally, energetically, my dimensions grew, and beyond what I knew was possible. And now, often, I'll tell new moms when I meet them, I will simply say, or people who are pregnant and it's their first child, I'll say it's a whole new dimension. You're going to a whole new dimension, because it's really is. I mean, if you truly lean into it, and I think that's the trick of our world right now, and it has been for so many years, is to sidetrack mothers from truly leaning into motherhood. We're expected to return to work after 6 weeks of our new baby and continue to work and, ignore this whole new sphere that has entered your space. Like you have a whole new energy now. It's not just the energy that was there. It's the energy and a new energy. And it's so, I think that has been for me so much of my mothering journey is, and how it has made it so beautiful, is that I have, in my own way, decided to surrender to that process of truly being a mother. And every day is not glorious. Every day has its own challenges, but there is this beautiful magical element even within the challenges that make it exactly perfect. And yeah, these are really challenging times, but I don't think that in the 1800s it was easier. And I don't think in the 1700s it was easier. They had different things that they were facing, but famine and starvation aren't an easy thing to go through either.
That
So
is a great way to put things in perspective.
it's every part of our ancestors has had their own challenge to get us here. And I think it is unwise to sit and look at our world and feel like we are powerless, because if we were truly powerless, and if our ancestors got us here, if our ancestors had thought that way, we wouldn't have gotten here, because we are not powerless. And just about what we talked about today is our infinite ability to create our world is ours every day, every moment, every now. That is what makes parenting so beautiful, is because I am creating the future.
Hmm.
And I also realized too that my children decided to come to me. I mean, I believe that they choose I believe that you choose your parents, and listeners can take that however they want to. But I do think that we choose to come to the family that we come to, and that we choose the time. We could have chose 1800s, and who knows, with past lives, if we didn't also experience those things or whatever. I believe that my children have come to me at the time that they have come to me, not only for my growth, but for their enhancement of the world. They are here to enhance not just my world, but the entire world. But a really popular book is The Butterfly Effect, and how, a tiny little butterfly's wings over in Africa can create a windstorm across the earth.
Hmm.
And science shows how everything affects everything. And I, I don't know how I touch people's lives, but I know that I do.
You do.
And I know also that because of this, if I can plant and create this beautiful being, if I can mold their energy into a beautiful way, then I am creating an exponential tree for the future, a big, mighty shade tree for the community to gather under, for life to thrive around, for there to be unity again. And that's how I look at mothering in 2023 now, because that is what we are doing when we create anything, whether that's music or it's a child or whatever. We are fueling the future. I'm sure you've listened to so many music from and albums of people that are not here anymore, that have transitioned their energy into another state. And those still impact you. And those still create a new life energy inside of you, even though their tangible human energy is not here anymore. And I feel like with children and hopefully a lineage, I never thought about this before I was a mother, but living inside of our beings, every one of us, is 7 generations of DNA. And that means too that 7 generations in the future, I'm still there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really powerful to think about. And it impacts the way I eat. It impacts the way I think. It impacts the way I, work on my own mental energy from time to time. Because I want to see a different world. And I want to create that world. Going back to what you were saying, at the beginning of what you're working on, and it's I think the most important thing is that it starts with us. It starts with right here, right now. We get to change it by making a decision internally to change it, and then that ripples out, and then all the world is blessed because we decided to bless ourselves first. We decided to take care of us first. So
I love that you brought it to that point, because that is literally the most important lesson for me right now in life. I am so grateful that I met you at the start of my journey, and I see such a transformation in you. You were already a wonderful person that I adored. I even, spending time with you today, I see the transformation in you. And I'm so thankful that I got to meet you right at the start of my transformation, and for the part that you play in it.
just a
Thank
part of
you.
you.
Thank you
Yeah,
for being a part of my journey. And
absolutely.
thank you for having me and for sharing your time and yourself with me.
Absolutely. It's an absolute pleasure as well. Jason, thank you for being on my podcast. Thank you
I
for being here.
loved it. Loved spending time with you always.
And thank you, listeners, for listening once again to the Sacred Nectar podcast. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. And here is Jason's work. Enjoy. Be nourished and blessed, dear friends. motherhood. And that's you and me. That's you and me. That's you and me.